Hockey Inside Out, brought to you by Videotron.
Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome back to Hockey Inside Out. Happy to be joined by Chris Nilan and Dave Stubbs again today. We won't have a Subban riot in Montreal like the Richard riot, but at that press conference, it looked like the Olympics might be over by the time they finally actually named them to the team, Dave.
Stu, the Olympic Games used to be all about amateur sport, right? And I'm afraid that yesterday's news conference was amateur hour. It was just embarrassing. And you know what? I don't know how many Canadian Olympic Committee people would have gotten involved in the decision-making, how they would have laid this thing out and scripted it. But when the Canadian Olympic Committee President Marcel Aubut gets up and talks and talks and talks, you know, the thing is, I've worked on both sides of this. I'm a journalist now. I have worked with the Canadian Olympic Committee. I was on their mission staff on a number of games. And I'm familiar with sitting down in team meetings and flag-raising ceremonies and some of the cheerleading and the, I guess some of the team-building exercises that they do. So I understand there's a time and a place for that. It was not yesterday in front of a global audience of people. As a Canadian, I feel almost, it's a little strong to say I was embarrassed by what I was hearing yesterday, but the cheerleading that was going on, you're not talking about Canada's bobsleigh or luge team.
You said it was almost as long as an Alex Kovalev shift.
Yeah, it was $150 million worth of hockey talent being trotted out. And let's face it, the Olympic Games in Canada, the Winter Games, are two things to many people. One, it's a hockey tournament, and two, it's a lot of window dressing around a hockey tournament. That's unfair, I think, to the amateur athletes or the high-performance athletes in this country who perform so well for this country. But when I see something like that yesterday, I just kind of shake my head and say, wow, who would have signed off on this? Because it was a dog's breakfast.
What was your thoughts when you saw Marcel Aubut up there?
Yeah, I was thinking Obama didn't make a big stink about killing bin Laden as they made about this Olympic team. And again, it was a little bit drawn out, you know. Minister of Transport comment, whoa, thank you, by the way, for the flight to Afghanistan. Appreciate it.
Subban is on the team. Chris, is he going to shine on the big ice? Is it going to help his game or hurt his game?
I think it'll be just fine. I mean, you know, he gets the knock that, oh, he's not that good defensively. I don't buy that from anybody. Anybody who knows the game and understands the game can see that he's a good defensive player. He's big, he's strong, he's quick, he reads plays well. Just because his maybe offensive abilities outshine his defensive abilities somewhat, doesn't make him a weak defensive player.
All the talk about bubble, I mean, I think that if PK Subban played for the Toronto Maple Leafs, we wouldn't have heard any of this talk. I mean, you know what? PK Subban, in my eyes, was never.
There's no Maple Leafs on Team Canada.
Yeah, he was never a bubble player, Stu. I never saw Subban as being a bubble player.
And he'll never be a Leaf player either.
No, he will probably not be that either. You know what? I never understood where they were coming from with that, and I think it was more bubble-headed than bubble, anything to do with that.
I look at what happened with the World Junior team, and I wonder sometimes if Hockey Canada thinks too much maybe when they're making these teams. You know, you go back to '98 when Rob Zamener made the team and Mark Messier didn't. Wow. And you just wonder, like, is it go with 4 number-1 lines, score 5 goals, tell them to score 6, sort of like the Edmonton Oilers in the day with Grant Fuhr? Do you think that could work at the Olympics, Chris?
Yeah, I think they overdo it sometimes. You get a lot of the hockey minds in the room. And again, you go back to the Messier Zamener thing. I mean, come on. To me, that sounds like it was something personal more than anything.
Yeah, and Steve Yzerman got cut from 2 Canada Cups also.
But, you know, you can overthink it. And listen, Canada has a lot of depth. They got a lot of guys that are not on that team that certainly could play in the Olympics. And you got to go with the guys you think, and you live with it, and you do the best you can when you're there. You look at Team Canada, the last gold medal in Vancouver, okay? They were out of that tournament. They were done. They stunk. They weren't playing well. They turned it around in time, obviously, and they end up winning the gold medal. But can you really, they were so close to failure, and they end up winning the gold medal. Now, it's going to be more difficult over here, though. Big ice, different story.
Well, it was Casey Stengel who said it's very easy to get the best players available out there, but it's another thing to get them to play as a team. And that's the thing, right? I mean, there's not going to be any kind of team building or any kind of strategy these guys are going to be able to build. It's not as though you can take a team and spend 6 months or go through a training camp and develop your systems and so on. You're taking a lot of very highly skilled, talented players, and you're going to ask them to play as a team, and they're going to have to do that in a hurry because there's no safety net under you in the Olympic Games.
Well, they do have to do it in a hurry, but the one thing all the teams have going for them, and the inspiration is playing for your country. So it can happen a lot quicker than it can, say, with a new coach coming into Montreal trying to set systems and put them in place. It can happen a lot quicker.
And the games have changed a lot, too, since the days when the Russians would be a 12-month-of-the-year hockey team and Canada would sort of cobble their guys together at the last minute.
now.
So now
Same
everybody is dealing, everyone's playing on the same sheet of
Well,
ice.
Chris Kunitz is on this team basically to be Sidney Crosby's line mate. And I'm wondering, would Martin St. Louis not have been a better fit? You don't have the chemistry of Martin St. Louis and Sidney Crosby together. I wonder if that would have worked, Chris.
Well, Canada looks like they went with some bigger players, right? You know, the smallest guy is Sidney Crosby. I definitely think a guy like Giroux could be there. A guy like Martin St. Louis. I feel bad for this kid not getting named, but again, the Brain Trust felt that they wanted to go in a different direction. And, you know, I could see maybe the bigger guys on the smaller ice. But this is a big ice service, and I think the speed and quickness of guys like Giroux and St. Louis could have really helped this team.
Yeah, St. Louis' career will not be defined by whether or not he plays or doesn't play on this Olympic team. I mean, he is a guy, pardon the pun, of towering skill and leadership, and he probably would have brought an awful lot to this team. But there's some very good quality players who are left behind, and it's going to be one of those things that these guys will look like geniuses, the Hockey Canada guys, the people who put this team together, or they're going to look like ghosts.
Gold or bust. Gold or bust,
Exactly.
right?
That's
now,
it.
you played for Team USA. What was it like, your experience playing?
It was
for your
awesome
country?
to play for your country. Just to get invited to the camp, I was so excited. And then when Bob Johnson named me to the team instead of Brett Hull, you know, it was huge. And Brett Hull was really upset. He couldn't believe it. Can you imagine?
No, I can't imagine.
Can you imagine?
Has he ever forgiven you?
Can you imagine Chris Nyland? They picked him over me. And here's the deal. Brett Hull was fat. And that was one of the big things. Bob Johnson in Calgary didn't play him because he was fat and out of shape. He was 20 pounds overweight. So, you know, he was upset with me because I made the team, or the Team USA, but he kind of brought attention to it in the media. And the bottom line was Fatso was too fat to play.
We'll be back after a short break, and we'll have a Knuckles knockout with Chris telling us who he's rooting for at the Sochi Olympics. Welcome back, and here's Knuckles Knockout for this week.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her. That's why I'm rooting for the U.S. A lot of people think I should be rooting for Canada because I live here, but listen, I'm an American. I make no bones about that. I love it here in Montreal. Listen, I played New York Rangers, Boston Bruins, Montreal Canadiens. I'm a Montreal Canadian for life. I love the Canadians. I'm a big fan of them. But Team Canada, that's a different story. Listen, if U.S. gets knocked out, fine. Then I'm going to root for Canada. But until that happens, I am rooting for the good old U.S. of A.
That's what's amazing about Olympic hockey, I think. And boy, I never knew you could carry a tune like that. And you
Believe
missed
me,
your
it sounds better in the shower.
I'll take your word for it. I love Olympic hockey because of the patriotism that's involved. I mean, what's amazing, if you're a Montreal Canadiens fan, is this will be the first games since 1998 that the Canadiens have actually had anyone representing Team Canada. They have had a whole pile of guys who played over the years, but not since Shane Corson and Mark Recchi in Nagano in 1998 have the Montreal Canadiens had anyone on Team Canada. So there's the Subban rooting interest and the Carey Price rooting interest. But the amazing thing about Olympic hockey is that this country will stop. When Team Canada is playing, everyone is going to be glued to their TVs, or they will be glued to radios, and they are going to be just totally sucking this thing up, every morsel of it, and it's going to be an amazing experience.
You know what I want to see? I want to see Pacioretty come down, dangle Subban, and go top shelf on Price. Awesome!
I want to see someone come in with their head down with Alexei Emelin waiting for him. Can you imagine?
Emelin thinking of
Knocking a
Subban.
teammate.
And I asked Plekanec the other day, I said, how are you going to feel to know that for 2 weeks you're going to be hated by everyone in Montreal? And he said, for 2 weeks I can live with it.
Well, Yemelin got to be careful, but the way he's playing, he might get toasted out there.
Well, maybe a healthy scratch.
He was a healthy scratch, and the thing is, we're right around at the midway point of the season. Last season was half a season, and the Canadians were fading at the end. It looks like a similar thing might be happening. We talk about Carey Price. His game has looked a little bit shaky some of the recent games. Emelin, a healthy scratch. Are you worried that this team might be running out of gas, Chris?
Not so much. I mean, listen, the season's long. This team, I believe, again, is overachieving. They have a good, solid core. I think depth-wise is where they get in trouble, and they're a smaller team. Now, we looked the other night. They got 2 points. A lot of people are saying, oh, they didn't play well in the third. They just hung on. Listen, they got 2 points. They survived the storm. Price kept them in there when he had to. And, yeah, there was some weak play in their own end down low, but that's going to happen over the course of the season, and it's going to happen to the Canadians at certain times, and it's a size thing. I mean, I looked at Brendan Gallagher the other night, and listen, this guy plays with fire. He's all over the place. He's in the crease all the time. But I saw him get up about, I don't know how many times the other night, get knocked down. He'll always get up, but that takes its toll after a while. There's no question. And, you know, same with Desharnais, Jonta, Buchanan, smaller guys, you know, it wears on you after a while. So those guys got to continually play with their hockey sense, their quickness, and their speed. They can't afford to get in those one-on-one physical battles, because that's where they get hurt.
And ultimately, it's about points, not style points, right?
Oh,
in the middle of April, that's all you're going to care about. You're not going to care if in the middle of January the Canadians eked out 2 points because they had to come back, or they blew a 3-goal lead and they came back and went to overtime and they got a point. If you make the playoffs by 1 point, you're not going to care that that's how it happened. You're going to care that the team is there.
That's right. Now, Alex Galchenyuk out for 6 weeks with a broken hand. How big of a loss is this, Chris?
It's a big loss. Not a big loss on the power play, obviously. He hasn't been playing there. You know, a lot of people would have loved to see him there more, but he wasn't. Now, it's going to be tough missing this kid. He brings youthful enthusiasm. He can skate. He got great puck handling skills, and he got a great shot. He got a sense of where the net is. You know, this kid, yeah, he will be missed. You know, he got 10 goals so far this year, but who's going to step up and take his place?
The power play.
Rennie Bork, 6 goals, 1 assist. Here's a guy that has an abundance of talent, size, toughness, can skate, all the things you want in a hockey player, and really, and I always try and give players the benefit of the doubt, but this guy, he's to me turning into a dog. He's dogging it.
Imagine if you could put Brendan Gallagher into Rennie Bork's body. What a hockey player you have.
Oh, God. Doesn't work that way, though. Imagine if you could put Richet's hands in Nyland's body. It just doesn't work.
Imagine if you could put me in F. Scott Fitzgerald's typewriter. I mean,
you wouldn't be working at the Gazette. I can tell you that.
Some people say I don't work here now, but that's another story.
In hindsight, was it a mistake for Michel Therrien to break up the kid line?
You know, you have to do what you have to do. This team has struggled. There was some injuries early on. He had to mix things up. He had to try and get guys going. Desharnais, Pacioretty was struggling, and it worked. You know, you got to spread it around sometimes. I really like that line, but the way this team was going with that line, it was like almost like they were a one-line team.
Well, that's what they were last when you had Eric Cole and you had Desharnais and you had Pacioretty, right? That was the one line that was doing anything productively for the Canadians, and I think that what Therrien was deciding was that he had to try to balance some of this out and to try to maybe generate some other guys. Offense, you're going to have to try to move some things around. So you look at Gallagher, you can move him kind of anywhere, and he's going to get other guys going. So the concern we talked a little bit earlier about the Canadians looking a little bit beaten up and so on, you look at a guy like Gallagher, he's not a huge guy. And you're right, Chris, I mean, the toll, I mean, you just watch him. If you ever isolate on him, and certainly from the press box some nights, you can afford to do that. The cameras won't do it on TV necessarily, but you just look at the beating he gets. Well, I mean, he just gets
I wonder if he needs a Chris Nyland on his line, somebody to protect him.
Well, he'd be protecting him all the time because he's always in the middle of everything. You never get a chance to play. You know, he's the guy that's in it all the time. And again, you know, I think a big physical guy alongside him, a guy that can draw people to him, people that you have to pay attention to, or people that are going to go and incite a little bit more than he does. A bigger would take a little heat off him, but I don't think that's going to happen. It's tough to find a player like that.
Well, That's it for another episode of Hockey Inside Out. Knuckles will be cheering for Team Canada, but before
You go right ahead.
Before Canadians fans get too upset, the man does have a Canadians
I do.
tattoo on his shoulder.
Go.
Canada,
Go Slovakia,
terre nos yeux, ton front naissant de fleurs glorieuses, car ton bras. That's a cut.